Welcome to Slash Forward. In this episode, we're going to explore the earlier career of David Cronenberg with his 1977 film Rabid. Let's get to it. We open on Rose, waiting patiently for her paramour, Hart, who's ducked into this petrol station for salted pork and jerked beef to sustain them on their motorcycling vacation. Then they go zipping around the countryside. Unbeknownst to them, this walrus and his family find themselves lost and in need of turning around. He makes a big show of it, huffing about how useless he must be, and gets their unreasonably large caravan stuck across the road. Since Hart failed to register for a bait training, he also fails to not catapult them into a nearby field. And Rose burns for his mistake. Luckily, this happened near a plastic surgery clinic, and the event is witnessed by a roof-dwelling busybody with poor self-esteem. So these classic men of action hit the cherries and zip off. Since Rose is likely to die and there's no hospital nearby, Dr. Kelloid breaks out the electric cheese slicer and cuts off a strip of bacon. They intend to give the specimen an experimental treatment that will allow universal grafting later on. 1 month later, we find her still in a coma and unable to be moved, but the graft appears to be doing well. Since there's no clear timetable and Hart is all healed up, he says farewell and leaves her in the care of the clinic. That evening, Rose wakes up distressed and confused. Lloyd hears and comes to check on her, so she cuddles up, resulting in some sort of bloody embrace that makes him whimper like a dog. He winds up at a patient's room with no memory of what happened and his armpit flayed. Dr. Kelloid requests a blood draw for testing before sending him off to the hospital. Meanwhile, one of the night nurses finds Rose's room in disarray. Connecting the two unusual events, they assume old Lloyd may have been perving out on the coma patients. Rose wakes up more calmly later on and goes sightseeing around the town. She cuddles up with a gentle heifer for some touch therapy and is confronted by a drunkard. She gives him some sort of face snap before running off. Rose gets back to the clinic and continues hunting. She finds a co-ed engaged in a late-night steamer and enters the tub in a way that sets off her creep alarm, but Rose quickly bear hugs her into submission. Meanwhile, Lloyd has checked himself out of the hospital and is making his way back to the clinic. We see that his encounter has caused some lingering trouble, which manifests itself in a way that's really distracting for the driver. You shouldn't do that. Rose is able to make a call out to Hart and makes a confusing plea for help before being ushered back to her room. Dr. Kelloid tries to calm her and inspect her grafts. They look okay, except for that there's some sort of pucker hole in her armpit with some sort of doodad moving around in there. She confides that she's no longer using the feeding tubes and offers to show him how she's managed to sustain herself, going in for a hug and sucking him dry. Hart calls Dr. Kelloid's partner Murray to find out what's up with the earlier distress call. Murray has no idea but offers to come pick him up and drive him to the clinic. Meanwhile, the evening's conquest stumbles into a local diner bleeding from the eye and desiring chicken. He grabs what he can get.
I said I think that one's mine.
You're probably going to want to let that go. Then he goes berserk. Meanwhile, at the clinic, the doctor tries to complete a groggy surgical procedure and manages to completely botch it. The resulting turmoil prompts Rose to find some clothes and dip out. Hart and Murray arrive at the clinic where Murray identifies the now rabid Dr. Kelloid, and Hart is taken to identify a young lady who, much to his relief, ends up not being Rose. She's managed to hitch her way back to town, feeding and leaving a string of infected behind her. Still searching, Hart is able to confirm Rose has been in contact with her friend Mindy and is going to stay with her in the city. However, the epidemic, assumed to be a strain of rabies, has spread enough to make the news, and when a vaccinated officer goes nuts, the station goes into temporary lockdown. She leaves Mindy due to restlessness and an insatiable hunger, and lucks upon some models for pleasure, where she can't swing a dead possum without hitting an incel or a thirsty pervert. It doesn't take long at all for her to receive a clammy hello. She then invites Slick Vino to snuggle up and check out her armpit of sensuality. The next morning, we find things popping off all over the city, resulting in the Prime Minister declaring martial law. Since the infected are violent and an incubated victim can only be cured by death, they've decided they need to lock it down. Rose heads to the mall for some shopping and must be putting off a scent because she barely sits down before being approached by a sad gentleman in riding boots. She's denied satisfaction, however, because he's promptly attacked by an infected man when he looks for a light. The rabid man runs off, resulting in this cadet spraying into the crowd, gunning down Santa Claus and his sexy elf friend in an attempt to reassert the reason for the season.
Christ.
Exactly, and setting off a mass hysteria. After being released from quarantine, Hart and Murray find the city nearly impenetrable, so they turn back. Murray goes home and lets Hart take his vehicle. We find that Murray made some assumptions about the condition of his family that may have been premature. Hart finds the city to be mostly deserted other than freaks, gunners, and cleanup crews. He eventually arrives at Mindy's, walking in on Rose making a face like she did an oopsie. Hart begins yelling at her about how she's killed hundreds of people, but then she gets mad at him about the whole motorcycle thing. They call it a draw and she ends up dumping him down the stairs, but declines to drink him up. When he comes to, he finds the phone ringing. It's Rose on the other end, confirming she's locked herself up with some rando. She wants to wait to see if he goes foamy in order to confirm she didn't start the whole thing. Unfortunately for her pride, he does, and Hart is forced to listen to the results while emoting hard. And in the morning, the cleanup crew picks her up from the gutter. And that was Rabid, a movie that proves helmets are kinda useless in a motorcycle crash. If you enjoyed the video, I'd love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.